Sidney, we'll jump right in. And really where I wanted to start was, obviously on the topic of AI tools and technologies. Are there any in particular that you currently have piloted or started to use within your practice? And for what purposes are you most interested in some of the new technologies?
So I haven't until CliniScripts, actually. I mean, I used a charting app that does some of the things automation, but I would say it's more automated than AI. So
Okay.
my introduction to this has been really incredible, and my mind has been a bit more blown open just hearing the stuff from today's meeting. I'm really excited to look into that. I think the admin would be the first thing. The notes, I've been really shocked at how accurate they are, like with minimal amount of editing, and that may be the odd one. So I'm really impressed with that. I definitely see value in the 24/7 that was discussed. I have some concerns about, but they would be more coming from. I was at a few different community health centers before I went into private practice and was teaching in the past as well. So I have a few concerns about what could happen in agencies with this, but some of those ethic things. I don't know where you want to go with this, so let me know.
Yeah, no, I think you've touched on a couple, so maybe I can kind of poke at a couple of those points. So in terms of the benefits, and you've seen maybe in your brief experience with the note-taking solution or others you might be starting to imagine, what do you think are the greatest benefits that you've observed thus far, both from your point of view, but also from perhaps a patient point of view?
So a couple of things from my perspective. Time saving is incredible. Also suggestions in some of the note things for where you might go in treatment that I would go, well, maybe, that's something that I considered, but maybe I would have pulled on a different string or gone in a different direction. So that's a benefit. I think for the patients and the clients, I think also being able to sort of share things more quickly if they need something in preparation for a file. I haven't used any sort of letter, referral level, or court stuff yet. I don't know if that's in development, but I could see that coming. I was aware of vaguely of some court thing that it wasn't to do with mental health. But so supporting patients that way, I could see very helpful. I could also see outside, again, coming to that 24/7 sort of chat thing, where I might have some, and also hearing today about the administrators or that like medical receptionists or administrators from multiple centers, that could be helpful. My one concern, well, I have a few concerns, but one of them is the danger, I think, especially in an agency, you have so many people you're expected to see per day. That doesn't always take into account how complex those people may be and how much energy it may take to engage and to move into. I do a lot of more emotionally focused as well as, CBT. I work with families and couples as well as individuals. So that is, I think this provides more time for reflection, more time for processing yourself through things, as well as through the case and where it's going. The danger I see in that is I've worked for different people, different executive directors, one who was amazing and who would see that extra time as worthy of processing, research, reading, all the stuff that we want to do when we leave grad school, but don't exactly have the time to do unless there are certain pockets that we sort of force it into. So I could see that being incredibly helpful that way and providing time for that and integration. But I could also see where others would go, oh, you can see 7 people instead of 5 or 6 or whatever. And so I think that's one of the ethical things which speaks beyond really what we're doing, but possibly looking at how agencies or agency heads, especially of the non-clinical. I don't think I had one clinical supervisor. They were all administrative to the health centers. So that's a concern.
Super. Yeah, and I think you've hit on a couple interesting ones. And again, if I could poke at a couple of them. So in terms of, you mentioned some of the practices perhaps in an agency, and the creation of time versus pulling forward even more meetings. Is there anything along those lines that you have an opinion on, or think how, if that is that a good thing, is that a bad thing? Because that's an interesting one we come across daily with the idea of time savings.
Yeah, I think it is more perhaps of a systemic or cultural sort of how we see psychotherapy, how we see mental health practice, and where our sort of values are. Because I will sacrifice things for direct client work, and so when we're creating more time, we're actually shifting the time. So I guess it really comes down to what's our focus and priorities, and maybe being a little more clear about that. And that really comes down to, the clinicians as well as their supervisors. I'm thinking like of, CMHA things at different agencies that I've had experience with, where, you've got fewer people and you've got a lot of demand. And the difference between doing counseling, right, or more surface, than doing deeper therapy work. So I could see, again, from what I'm hearing today, I'm like, okay, this would be really cool to almost partner with it. I could see partnering with a lot of the AI rather than it just being a tool for something. I don't know if that sounds weird, but that's just sort of what comes to mind. So I see value in the terms of taking away, because normally what would happen for me, and I would be behind in notes like every week, so I'm going home and I'm doing a pile there. I take good notes, so that's good. But however, it's the processing stuff. That's one other thing I think that clinicians would need to be aware of, is we process a lot through rewriting our notes, right? And doing the charting. So in that sort of, processing our own stuff as well as seeing where we're going. And because the AI, from what I've experienced so far, does it so well, there could be more of a tendency to sort of just, do a quick read through and put it there and move on, rather than to do the processing too. So that's just a thought. I don't know if that's what anybody else has found.
Really interesting thoughts on that. Appreciate that, Sidney. And then in terms of overall acceptance as these tools start to enter the space, how are you finding the reaction to patients and sort of the transparency around using AI, and in any particular reactions? Is there skepticism? Is there enthusiasm? Is it a little bit of both? What are you observing thus far?
Actually, yeah, more intrigue and cautious enthusiasm for the most part. Even I serve a community with old order Mennonites, so they don't have health cards, and it's they don't have access to, any electronics and stuff like that, other than a landline telephone. They've been actually quite open to it, and I have a number of different people from different cultures. The only one negative was from a person who's gone through a lot of stuff in the past, also comes from an IT background, interestingly, and he was the only one who said, I really don't want anything recorded anywhere, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine with me. I want you feeling safe more than anything. But everybody else has been, and if this helps you do stuff too, and it's like, it was not about it helps me, it does. But, this also, because I've shared with them some of the things that have come out and said, there's a suggestion for this. What do you feel? Do you want to go in this direction? You want to try something, in that area? And so they've all been open, and there's been none negative, really.
Yeah, fantastic feedback thus far. And so along those lines, then, I think you touched a little bit, and it seems we can't have a conversation about AI, and in particular AI in a clinical space, without talking about that privacy and security. And obviously the sensitivity of the data is super important. Is there anything from your perspective that you make sure that's in place as a clinician and to ensure that privacy and security on your end as you're implementing new technologies or even in your day-to-day work?
So in my day-to-day work, everything, I'm very transparent with people. I was asked if I can take notes. I show them, and then I do use a note like on my iPad. I keep it local, and then I delete anything, I erase that, and then I go through I have a cleaning process, like an Avast sort of cleaner type thing that cleans that. So I'm very open with them with that. With the AI, I have to admit that I am very new and very much a newbie and not very knowledgeable. So I'm sort of crash teaching me at myself at the moment and exploring that. So what I explain to them, as far as I'm aware, first of all, that it's compliant with all of, our legislation, the privacy legislation, but I also remind them that this is gone. This is how I understand the system works. Once the raw data is processed, I download it. It's to my local thing. It goes right into the chart, and then it's wiped. I sweep it from the system, and it's wiped as far as I know. I did suggest that there may be a thing where it's held for 24 hours, which I really, really would like, because at times I don't get to it until I'm at home. But we found a workaround with that, which is working perfectly for me. So I record it separately, upload it, and boom, the work is done. So, and they've all been really, really okay with that. Beyond that, I haven't done anything more in terms of assuring privacy or anything, but I'm certainly open to other people's suggestions and tightening that up if necessary.
That's fantastic. And obviously, as the technology that gets introduced, it's evolving so fast. There's certainly requirements are being discussed daily in terms of things. You mentioned storage, and I know that's one. Just to be able to work, at a later date. Those concepts are certainly coming to the forefront. So I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, even that night, because I'm okay with the 24-hour wipe. It's just sometimes I will have some emergencies through the day, and I will do a lot of back-to-back. So I won't get a chance until 9, 10, or 11 at night to start working on it. So that's a very welcome thing for a 24-hour.
Absolutely. And you alluded earlier to the concept of partnering with AI. Do you see AI primarily as a tool to augment the work of yourself as a professional, or do you envision it to potentially replace certain aspects? And where would you potentially draw the line?
So that's something I've been thinking about. I had no idea it was as far as it was, as I heard today earlier in the presentation here. I have to do a lot of processing there. But prior to that, my thought was there's a lot that can be done, and certainly seeing some of the studies, and I want to review those and do some more research as well that were presented today. My one thing but see, it is developing so fast, and sometimes I did medical ethics before I went into psychotherapy, and so that we can do something doesn't always mean we ought to do it, because we sometimes take the time to think of all the implications that we're looking at all of these positive things, but other things that could happen, and some of those were mentioned today, and the caution, I guess. And this might sound strange, but I guess one thing that I've always wondered, dealing with a chat bot or something, and I know that's very primitive to what we're talking about developing, is one thing. Dealing with even humanoid voice and looking at different rough AI things that you can hear on YouTube and whatnot, there's something to me about dealing with a person with a soul, something behind the eyes. I know that sounds weird, but it's we know from research that the modality of intervention is at least as, and not necessarily more important than, the therapeutic alliance, the relationship. And I understand, we can develop relationships with certainly non-human beings, dogs and stuff. Dogs very important to me. My partner would argue sometimes more important than him, but that's all right. But anyway, so I can understand that, but I think there is something different, even virtually. Like, I remember during COVID, I was still at a couple of health centers then. And I remember one of my teens who desperately was struggling. And when we connected, and he said after that session, he said, I never thought I would still feel the connection with you through the screen, but I did. And that sort of shocked me, because I was new to virtual at that time, and thinking, wow, that is very cool. And that's really important know. And then I thought, how do we create that and how do we sustain that? Obviously, many people have done it before me and continue to do it right now. And but I don't know. And then when you were talking, I was also thinking, is this my worry that I'll be out of a job? But my purpose in my work is to work myself out of a job, right? To empower people in their own ways to find and become, who they're wanting to becoming, and working through their own struggles to a point where they can move on and maybe check in every now and then, but move on on their own. So anyway, I'm not sure if I've answered your question there. I'm still in process myself, I think.
You have answered it and then some, and I really appreciate your wonderful perspective. And in fact, you've answered probably my final questions in a beautiful narrative. So what I'm going to do is just skip to one last thought, Sidney, if you don't mind, and really with 1 minute to go, is there one message you'd like to leave our audience with or to take away about AI and mental health practice, and what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's something that's critical for where we're going, and I think it can help both practitioner and patients in ways that we didn't understand. But I guess just the caution in where we go and the time to look at what we're doing. Phenomenal stuff available. Let's not be afraid of it. Let's engage with it, but also I think with that healthy caution, because these are people's souls we're dealing with and their lives, right? So
super, and we truly appreciate your thoughtful observations and perspectives on the topic today, Sidney. Thanks so much for your time and taking part in this interview. And Naman, we'll turn it back to you for a conclusion.